Welcome to Cybersecurity Where You Are, the Center for Internet Security's podcast. I'm Sean Atkinson, CISO at CIS.
And I'm Tony Sager, Senior Vice President and Chief Evangelist at CIS. Cybersecurity affects us all, whether we're online at home, managing a company, supporting clients, or running a state or local government.
So join us on Wednesdays as we discuss trends and threats, explore security best practices, and interview experts in the industry.
Together, we'll clarify these issues, creating confidence in the connected world. Welcome back to the Center for Internet Security's podcast series, Cybersecurity Where You Are, where we take on a variety of topics and try to bring a little common sense to the complex world of cybersecurity. And a particularly fun and special episode today, we're joined by the Chief Executive Officer of the Center for Internet Security, John Gilligan. John, welcome to the show.
Tony, thanks for having me.
No, it's a real treat, John. Things are so busy nowadays, we don't get a chance to talk much, so we have to schedule a podcast episode to catch some time with you. But what a treat it is, and it's quite a fascinating time for the industry at large, and also for us. But let me take you back about 25 years ago, John. So we just celebrated the 25th anniversary of the founding of the Center for Internet Security, and both of us have a bit of historical touch to that. I mean, we've been associated with it. But tell me your perspective. So then you were a government executive. I forget, maybe the CIO of the Air Force at the time. But I remember you as an enthusiastic ally and partner of CIS, as I was from the National Security Agency. But what was your thinking of the time there? What was the role that you saw for a nonprofit, and the focus being security benchmarks, the configuration management problem?
Yeah, so back then, as you described, it was probably when I was at the Air Force that I became involved with the Center for Internet Security. And there were a couple of attractions, one of which was, as you know, in the Air Force, we were in the process of moving to what we would call a benchmarked version for our Microsoft products in order to deal with what had been the most frequent issue that had resulted in security breaches, which was misconfigured Microsoft products. And so the effort, proved to be enormously successful, but it to some extent it predated some of the work by the Center for Internet Security. And so when I saw that, and this is probably through Alan Powler, that the center was working on this problem, I was all in, because the challenge was we in the Air Force had done the equivalent of a benchmark. We worked with you and NSA, we worked with NIST, we worked with DISA and Microsoft to develop this, but there are many other products that we had that needed the same process. And so it was just obvious that this was something that was desperately needed in order to improve the overall security resiliency of our global infrastructure.
Yeah, John, I think you and I were independently reaching similar conclusions also about the role of non-government partners to support the operations of the government, the DoD in particular, right? So it's not good. There's no, that sort of late 90s, early 2000, what were the terms? About joint vision, coalition warfighting. It was pretty clear that we had to think of these things as collaborative activities, not as let's secure the DoD and the others can worry about themselves. And so having that was one of the things I saw was the role of a partner who was working outside the government on the same problem, and recognizing that there was so much commonality that we might as well start with what we have in common, as opposed to the traditional approach, which is the government has special requirements and really has to be treated as an entirely separate work stream. So I think that was and again, I often refer back to the work you mentioned, the Air Force work and standardizing desktops, and with no schmooze implied here, John, as one of the high water marks of security management, over the last couple decades plus. I think it was really an important work. And, lucky us, we're both still involved with this kind of work sometime later. But the world is really different. And that's really the topic today, right? The context, the role of the federal government relative to some of the work that we do, the rapid pace of change in the industry. And, that's where we're grappling today, right? So the first 25 years, I think we did just an astounding job of achieving impact and growth. But now you've looked at the situation today with the team, and so much is different. And I think you declared the term CIS 2.0. So what's changed about the context here in the last couple of years that's really led us to rethink some of the basic principles and the role of the Center for Internet Security?
Yeah, so Tony, the catalyst clearly was the direction that we got from our government sponsors and DHS CISA that they were reducing our funding. And so that was an opportunity for us to take a step back and reevaluate, knowing that there was a potential that there might be no funding in the future. So that was the catalyst. But behind that was a growing list of changes that were happening in our environment. And so the catalyst of the funding reduction served as a good opportunity to say, wait a minute, we need to set a different path. And so, as you're aware, we have been working for the last couple of years in an area that we call, hybrid threats or multidimensional threats. The point being, it's no longer sufficient to just look at cybersecurity and cyber threats in isolation of what we're finding more and more is complementary threats in the physical world or in influence or information operations. And so we had made substantial progress. And in fact, in the documents that had been produced by the multi-state ISAC, defining their progress and future challenges, they had recognized the need to address these hybrid multidimensional threats. And so the implication of that, though, was pretty significant for an organization like the Center for Internet Security, which had, through its history, pretty much exclusively focused on cybersecurity threats. And so this became one of the 2.0 pillars, if you will, was really to expand the focus beyond cybersecurity to what we're seeing is really more commonly now being the Department of Defense and other organizations are recognizing the interplay between these types of threats. The second, and somewhat related, was the clear need for us to expand the audience that we were addressing as a company, and even in the multi-state ISAC context. And part of that goes back to over the last couple of years, we've had engagements. So, for example, we worked with Mayor Carolyn Simmons in Stamford, Connecticut, and we called the effort a secure cyber city. We've begun to engage other mayors across the country who likewise have said, hey, I want to improve my cybersecurity. We had, as a part of our hybrid threats activity, been engaging with law enforcement across the United States. And so it became quite clear that the audience that we have been addressing, mostly the security practitioners and professionals, was too small. We needed to address the broader audience because they are increasingly aware and concerned about cybersecurity, and they need some different communications. And so, I hearken back to an experience that was sort of the precursor to this in 2018, when CIS was fortunate enough to be asked to stand up the Elections Infrastructure ISAC. We thought at that time, well, this will be straightforward. We'll just take the same things we've been doing for the multi-state ISAC and we'll send them out. And I recall vividly, it was after we got started and we were a couple of months into it, and I got a call from a senior elections official, and it was sort of somewhat irritating. He said, stop sending this stuff to us. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, this is not what we want. This is not helpful. So I asked and got copies of what we were sending, and we were sending things that we would normally send to chief information security officers and their technical staff. And subsequently, we developed a whole set of products for the elections community, and they've been enormously successful. So the point being, as we expand the audience, we've proven we can do it with elections. We've proven we can do it for law enforcement. We've started discussions with mayors, but there are many leaders, executives and organizations that really need to have a better understanding of what are the threats, what should they be doing. And so that was a second area. I guess a third major area, in my view, that was a pillar, if you will, of CIS 2.0 was really the tools that we are using. And up until fairly recently, in the main, we had a website and we used email. And that was our way of communications. And we started now a couple of years ago an effort we call the CIS portal. And the vision for the portal is that everything that we do in engaging with our stakeholders, our customers, and even our employees should be done through the portal. And we've made some substantial progress on that. And the opportunity is enormous. One, in terms of reducing a lot of manual work, but two, dramatically improving the quality and volume of what we can provide to our customers and stakeholders. That coupled with, we have, now reached a kind of a major milestone in, I call it re-engineering the Security Operations Center, where we had some custom software, and we've now deployed a very robust commercial product that will let us do much more complicated analysis on the information that we ingest from various sensors. And the hope would be that that will improve the products and the service that we can provide. And then a final in this area of tools is artificial intelligence. We've done some pilots. The pilots have been in the elections community. They've been in some other, our best practice community. But what they have shown is there is enormous potential of leveraging artificial intelligence to dramatically improve products by tailoring them to specific audiences, to allow us to update and to refine the products very rapidly. And so, those three pillars of, the multidimensional or hybrid threats, the broader audience, and the tool set, in my view, were sort of the main pillars of the CIS 2.0. And I thought the funding reduction became an opportunity, since we already knew we were going to need to make some changes, to say, all right, let's get some focus on these areas as well.
Yeah, that has that ring of never waste a good crisis, right? It forces you to think about things in a different way, and all of those aspects you mentioned that are complex. That is, they're not solve a problem; it's to solve a series of problems. I think that's about right. And this I'll call it the maturation of the cybersecurity business. We grew up more on the technology side, both of us. And the idea was, if we sort of could secure the technology, then other things would be better, right? The operations we'd have more confidence. But it turns out, the psychology of change, right? The incentives to do things, or the linking. How do I translate technology risk into operational risk? That's a challenge, and that's kind of at the heart of what you were talking about in the second of your pillars, which is you have to convince people who don't live and breathe technology, but in fact are responsible for some other aspect of a mission, and you have to help them see why this is important to them, right? And it's not in our language; it's in their language. This is an area where I know I'm going to cartoon it a bit here, but the attacker is often a more natural systems level thinker than the defender, has been my experience, because they just view technology as a means to an end, and there are other means to achieve that end, right? They're trying to achieve their operational effects. And so they freely hybridize their approaches, because that's kind of naturally the way, a nation level attacker will think about the problem. For defense, it's harder, I think, because of the bifurcation or the separation of authority and funding and responsibility and even language and planning. It takes extra work, and I think addressing that really feels like the right answer, right? Bringing it into the operational context of the problems that we're trying to solve.
And with that, we'll be right back after this quick break.
Are you a U.S. state, local, tribal, or territorial government?
If so, you know just how difficult cyber defense can get.
You're the frontline defense against cyber threats, yet you don't have the shiny tools, big budget, or skilled talent of an enterprise.
Well, guess what? You don't need them.
You do need a community of like-minded folks to unlock the power of collective cybersecurity.
And that's the superpower of the Multi-State Information Sharing and Analysis Center.
The multi-state ISAC provides cyber underserved organizations with protections they otherwise couldn't afford at a price that works for them.
But it's more than just access to services. It's access to a community of peers where your participation protects them and theirs protects you.
Not to mention access to the 24/7/365 CIS Security Operations Center as your full-time public sector cybersecurity partner.
Available as a single organization or state or territory-wide option, the MS-ISAC membership provides threat intelligence, monitoring, and more to fortify your cyber defense.
Become a member today by visiting cisecurity.org/ms-ISAC. So once again, John, I know you've been through this multiple times, as many of us have, to the change management problem. So recognizing that, one of the things I really respect about your work here is the period of rapid growth that we've been on for the last few years. I'll say sort of traditional growth, through the traditional products that we produce and refining of our business operations and so forth. And now we find ourselves in a really different place, based on the pillars that you talked about here. And now you have a different kind of change management problem. And again, in my experience, the people that get you to one level often struggle when you're aiming for the next target, right? You brought them in with a particular set of skills in a particular context, and now everything is different. And sort of figuring out what is the change management problem? How do we have the right skills? Do we have the right team? Do we have the right model in front of us? So, any thoughts on that? Because you've really, in the last, I don't know how many months now since last spring, have really focused on change management as the key leadership activity here at CIS.
Yeah, as you mentioned, Tony, organizations as they grow often have different needs, skill needs, and this is one of the challenges often that entrepreneurs face. And they start a company and they grow it, and then they realize that the skills and the capabilities that made them so successful maybe are not exactly the ones that they need going forward. And I think to some extent in CIS, we've recognized that for a long time. A couple of years ago, we formed the Learning and Development Organization. And it was with that in mind that as we grow, we need to help bring the employees' skills along. And so we provided a lot of support in that area. We had identified critical skill areas, et cetera. But I think we have been largely successful. I think the other dimension of change is, and I've witnessed now several areas where we have tried to undertake things that we were not doing previously and to get started. And what we found is it wasn't always the case that our starting efforts were exactly on track. We didn't know exactly what we needed in terms of skills. We didn't have the processes in place, et cetera. And so that's been a bit of a challenge for us as well. And as we go forward, as we, for example, move from a government-funded contract to basically a commercial engagement with the states and local, it's a different engagement. It's a different model. It's a different set of skills. We're going to have to adjust that as well. And in that area in particular, I think there's a lot of potential positives because to some extent, and having you and I both having spent a lot of time in government, you find that government contractors sort of mirror the behavior of governments, and not all of that is good. Governments tend to be bureaucratic. They sometimes get focused on the wrong things, and not being critical of CIS, but we had to in order to respond to the directions and guidance that we were getting. As we go forward, I think we're going to have less or maybe none of that, and that's going to be freeing But then it also means that our people need to say, well, all right, now I'm serving the customer totally and not serving what the government tasking is saying. So I think yes, there are challenges. And I think the one thing that I find particularly refreshing about CIS is, unlike many organizations, in particular in today's environment, where when they make a change that requires new skills, they basically, separate the people they have and hire a new team, or if they have a financial hiccup, they, separate people. We have been able to, and I think we'll have some adjustments. I think that goes without saying. But in the main, what we have is sort of our culture and our support system allows individuals, should they be motivated, and we're not forcing people, but if you're motivated, there's plenty of opportunities for training, development, to learn new skills, take new positions. And, I can look around the organization, and now I've been around long enough to watch people who have started in certain roles, and they have moved through the organization and taken on much more significant roles. And that's very heartening to see that, and I would expect that that'll continue in the future.
Yeah, and your points are well said about government, and you and I both have long, productive government careers, and there's so much to admire about that. But these are giant bureaucratic institutions, and so there's a lot of machinery that's put in place. I'll say roughly to maintain the status quo. And some of that's very noble, right? To provide oversight and respect for law and the privacy of, person's information, all that kind of stuff. But it can trap you into this sort of behavior. But one of the things I really appreciated, and that we have really, I think, preserved here at CIS, is the opportunities for growth, that sort of separate from a commercial business model. Again, the environments I grew up in, I know that you help manage. There was tremendous support for the kind of activities that you talked about, that we could see people grow as the mission changed. There were funding, management attention, et cetera, were expected to provide that kind of environment. And I think, I know you and I talked about this when you took over as a full-time CEO. We didn't see some of those things that we were used to in government, right? This support for growth, and you put all that in place. And I think that has really been one of the hallmarks of the last several years here at CIS. But onto the change activities, though, and you talked about culture, which we often talk about at CIS. But we're, one of the reasons we celebrated so much around the 25-year ago founding is that we often go back to our foundational principles, like why are we here, and what are we all about? So, as our leader, what are some of the things that we must always keep at the center of our attention, in the middle of our leadership discussions? What properties would you describe as the things we have to preserve, no matter what form we take or what the customer base looks like? What is really the core of the mission here from your perspective? And you knew the founders as well as I did, in fact, as well as anybody did, and kind of the spirit of why we're here.
Well, yeah, I think there's a couple of things that are foundational principles that become imperatives for the future. And the one that was one of the founding principles was collaboration. And as you recall, in the early days, Center for Internet Security had a very, very small staff, in fact, no offices, and was leveraging the talent across the globe. And so as a result of that, CIS developed trusted relationships with a lot of individuals. And so it's the collaboration and we'll work with anyone in a nonpartisan, type non-product specific way that I think is one of the hallmarks. And as we have the luxury, unlike many organizations that are for-profit, government organizations, et cetera, we can work with almost anyone. And a lot of what we have been able to accomplish is because people want to work with us, because we help magnify. This is a term you often use, is we're not necessarily looking at CIS we're trying to be enormously large. We're trying to accomplish the mission. And so it's the collaboration, trusted partnerships. It's this continued focus on the mission. And as you know, we've had discussions over the years, especially as we have grown, to say, wow, we could grow further. And the discussions with the management team and the board have been, well, that's not our objective. Our objective is to have impact. And so as a result, we have, in some cases, addressed, well, what we need to do is take some of our best practices, some of our lessons learned, and help get those out. We call this thought leadership, something that you personally have helped us mature. And so I think, from the collaboration and trust to the, ability to work with anyone sort of in an unbiased way to, focus on the mission and, what are the sort of the thought leadership opportunities or things that I think need to be sustained in the future. And then I think internal to the organization, this is a company with a very unique culture. And it's something that I came to appreciate to some extent as I was on the board, but became much more appreciative when I came into the organization and I saw the impact on how people treat one another, how they rally around the mission. And so yes, no one, including me, we all find little, you say, oops, we didn't do that quite right, but we have a North Star in the leadership principles, and the culture makes this a place where not only are we doing something that's really important for the nation and globally, but we have a culture that respects people, makes them feel good about what they have done. I continue to point out something that in the early days, I was not quite sure how this was going to go. And this is what we call the Idea Alliance. And this was the genesis of this was in the aftermath of the George Floyd incident. And everyone was worried as well, what do we need to do organizationally? And so we looked at it and said, let's form the Idea Alliance. And it was really the employees that came forward with this concept. But as I look back, the Idea Alliance has maintained faithfulness to our culture and to what we're trying to achieve in a way that I think is, I don't know of any other organization that has been as successful. Many organizations had programs, initiatives, hiring things, training initiatives, et cetera. But what they didn't address, I think, was what the Idea Alliance has done is increasing the knowledge of employees about their coworkers and helping to build a climate of mutual respect and understanding, which is really, I think, the hallmark of what we want to have in our culture. And so I think it's just been, to have an ability for a employee-led organization to have such an impact, in my opinion, on the organization is another example of sort of the culture of the organization, that we're very sensitive to what are the ideas and thoughts. Idea of CARES, our philanthropy efforts are another example where, again, totally employee-led and just fantastic efforts.
Now, John, I think that's right. I mean, the mission nature of what we do, right? The sort of noble cause draws certain kinds of people. I think it draws us, but there's a whole virtuous cycle that's happening here. All those programs that you mentioned, right? They're relatively new, and the level of participation, the numbers of people who participate, and the activity and so forth is so far beyond what we saw in government, at least what I saw in government. It was more pockets of people who have common interests. You might build affinity groups and so forth. Here, it is just all over the population, and the level of participation by people, the level of activity, including by senior management, is just part of the expectation, as you said, sort of built into the culture and expected. And it also creates an environment of respect and of participation, which I think is just such a healthy part. And I think is respectful to the kind of people that want to come to a mission-driven organization. I think it really speaks to the leadership and so forth. So those principles, and they're all, again, I think from the first meeting and all subsequent meetings of leadership and the board, and our ability to reach out to surviving founders and our key partners is just amazing. And one of the things I did a lot of talking to early volunteers as part of this 20th and 25th year, and to a person, our early volunteers often speak of their work with CIS as some of the most satisfying work they have done in their careers. And these are amazing people. You know a bunch of them, and they're just, they speak so high, and some of them have been involved literally since day one, still active as volunteers, folks like Randy Marchani and others. So it is really, I think, the part of your job is not a job. You're managing a trust, right? You're the keeper of a trust, a something that is special, that deserves this kind of attention, and a mission that really speaks to the goodness that we see in the industry. I often say we don't have a business model without the goodwill and talent that comes to us, both as employees, but also as a worldwide volunteer organization. It's really quite astounding. So John, just sort of a last thought or two about the next couple of years for us here. What do you see? We've been in this really high speed change management activity, rebuilding our airplane in flight here, our business model in response to those conditions, but also addressing some of these larger factors you've mentioned, like the broadening of our audience and the need to deliver and create and deliver content in different ways than we have. But any thoughts kind of the next couple of years where you think as we come out of the massive change and really try to institutionalize this?
Lots of thoughts, as you might expect. So let me just summarize a couple. First, with regard to our engagement with state and local, tribal, territorial organizations, I see significant change that will result from this new fee-based membership model. And even if Congress at some point funds the MSISAC again, I think the change will be permanent. And what do I mean by that? Well, one is, and we started putting more emphasis on the need for states and territories to address security resilience across the entire state and territory. It's called whole of state. Why is this important? Well, it's important because no matter how big the MSISAC would get, the MSISAC is a catalyst and a supporter. But the states and territories really have the tools and the ability to engage in a much more meaningful way these local organizations that really need help. And so the work of the MSISAC will transition from supporting 18,000 plus organizations to, yes, we're going to support 18,000 organizations, but we're going to particularly focus on states and territories to help them implement whole of state approaches. So we'll be advisors, we'll be facilitators in terms of helping bring local organizations and states and territories together, et cetera. That is a major change for us. And as a part of that, we're also going to need to engage, back to the engaging with a broader audience than just the CISOs. We need to be engaging with mayors, county executives, governors, key governor staff, because the whole of state, the whole of city, it really requires that executive leadership. It can't be done by the CISO. The CISO or CIO can be enablers and facilitators and help execute the program, but it has to be understood and the direction has to be communicated. So I think that's going to be a major change, which I think is going to be quite powerful and beneficial to the nation. So that's with regard to our engagement with state and locals. I think with regard to thought leadership, I think we're going to continue the path And I think we've sort of, after a few years where our thought leadership was really more reflected in our products, and that's good. We did some product efforts that when you look at it, say, wow, these are kind of really very well done from a thought leadership perspective. But I think we're also now starting to take on, in the last couple of years, some the hard problems. In fact, today had a meeting with one of our board members, and we're talking about what we CIS can do to help fill the void in the artificial intelligence area, where there's a need for policies, best practices, perhaps some benchmarks, et cetera. And again, we're in the best position to do that. One, because we're trusted, and two, we're able to work with lots of different organizations. So I think I see us continuing the path. We recently published the draft document that is the follow-on to Secure by Design, which I think could have a major impact. And obviously what we've done in reasonable cybersecurity is also. So those, I think, we're going to have continued longevity. And then with regard to our other products and services, I think we're going to continue. Hardened Images obviously continues to be a very important part of, because the revenue that it generates is helpful. It helps us fund other things that we do. But I think we're going to continue to evolve our products. And what I see is increasingly, though, we're going to be working with partners. And so the partners are going to be vendors. The partners in some cases are going to be organizations, companies, managed security, managed service providers, managed security service providers, to help them be able to duplicate some of the successes that we've had. And so I see that the opportunities abound. I could go on for a long time, but that's just at the sort of at the top level. There is no doubt that CIS will continue to be successful. I think we've demonstrated that. Even the early, I mean, it's been only 6 months since we were notified of the funding. We've already basically figured out how we're going to replace that funding. If we don't get the cooperative agreement, we got a little bit of a challenge of replacing the rest of the funding, but we've sort of figured out that by the middle of next year, calendar year, we will have replaced the funding that was lost through the government funding. That's pretty astounding. Now, obviously, we got to continue on the path that we're on, and there's no guarantee, but the path that we're on, and the trust and respect that we have built up with state and local organizations, is, we're working through details of some of their funding and in terms of the contracts, et cetera. But that's a pretty astounding, transformation to go from, an organization. You remember in years past, the cooperative agreement was 70% of the funding of the Center for Internet Security, when in the last year or so, it's been about 20%, still a fairly significant portion. But, it looks like in probably less than 12 months, we will be in a position to have totally replaced that with the fee-based membership model, which is a testament to many people within the organization who have worked hard in what we've been calling CIS 2.0 to make that happen.
Yeah, I think, and John, those are great themes that you brought up, this whole of state thing, and it's consistent with the way you opened with the discussion about pillars. So we move from, we're on the defender side, the technology defender side, to we're empowering the government executives, the public policy makers, the government leadership, right, for them to achieve their goals. I mean, it's other people's missions that are really the focus. And we have tremendous opportunity to empower them, to inform them, to give them the tools with which to fight. But I think switching the focus that way is right on the money, and makes, remember in the prior administration, what was the term? America's Cyber Defense Agency, right? And there's noble cause, and that's all good, but it sort of presents the problem as a separate problem. We'll defend you, or we're the defenders. And the shifting focus, triggered by all this activity, is we're here to empower those who are delivering services to the population, right? Who are protecting the interests of their citizens, who are trying to create safe business environments, right, to encourage business investment in their state, whatever the area that we're talking about. And I think that is right. And also the rethinking of our delivery machinery, right? And partners first is a term that you have used. I think that's exactly right, which is to get scale is not about our growth. It's about how do we amplify our impact through the work of others, right? We want there to be a successful marketplace that delivers solutions either directly or indirectly. And I think that is a very exciting future for us. And I share your optimism. There's still some challenges here ahead of us, but there always will be. And that's the nature of technology and society and what we're seeing across the board. So anyway, John, thanks for all your insight. I know this is a really busy time for you, but it's also a really important time. We had done our best, I think, at CIS to honor the founding principles, right, the intentions of the founders, at the same time modernize in the face of a really complicated world that we face here. Any last thought you care to share with the audience, as long as we have your attention and time?
No, well, just to say, I mean, this has been the opportunity of a lifetime for me. When I had left my prior roles, I had never expected that I would be, in a CEO role, and it was sort of happenstance that it happened. But what I have found is working with all of the men and women in CIS, helping achieve the mission, helping, steer the growth opportunities, has just been a delightful experience for me. And so I have thoroughly enjoyed, the opportunity. And again, it's really the people that make CIS special. And that's been the real delight for me, is that while we have problems and issues, it's the people who are genuinely focused on the mission. And I think we're going to continue that focus, and we're going to continue to be successful.
Yep, right with John, and very excited to be a part of it. So thanks for everything. And to our audience, thanks again for your time and attention. We never take it for granted and do our best to deliver interesting speakers, certainly today, and topics that will help inform and share some of the things that we are seeing in the cybersecurity industry. Please subscribe to us in all the usual ways. We're always open to your feedback and happy to take on the topics of most interest to you. And with that, thank you again, and we'll catch you for the next episode. Thank you for listening to the podcast today.
The thoughts and opinions expressed by our podcast guests are solely theirs and do not necessarily reflect those of CIS.
Tune in on Wednesdays for a new episode. And in the meantime, visit our website at cisecurity.org.
Together, we'll continue our efforts of creating confidence in the connected world.